Welcome to this week's edition of Mississippi Happenings Podcast. My name is David Oles, and here with me each week is my friend and my co-host, Jim Newman. Jim, how you doing, buddy?
I'm doing better. Any better,
Good.
I'd be twins.
Yes, I understand. Our guest today is Cliff Johnson. Cliff is a director of the MacArthur Justice Center at the University of Mississippi School of Law. He's a graduate of Mississippi College and Columbia University School of Law. He has practiced law in Mississippi for 33 years. Cliff prosecuted large healthcare providers while working at the Department of Justice during the Clinton administration, represented thousands of plaintiffs in class action and whistleblower litigation across the country while in private practice, and has handled numerous high-impact Mississippi civil rights cases as the director of the MacArthur Justice Center. Cliff, I admire your dedication and your commitment to the underserved. It is a pleasure to have you with us.
Great to be here, David and Jim. Appreciate being asked.
Thank you. Cliff, let's start out and tell us about the MacArthur Justice Center.
Yeah, the MacArthur Justice Center is a national civil rights firm based at Northwestern Law School in Chicago, operated there for a while as the sole office, and then ultimately the MacArthur Justice Center decided to expand into other places, particularly the South. So we have offices, in addition to our office in Chicago, in St. Louis, in New Orleans, here at the University of Mississippi, and in Washington, D.C., we have our Supreme Court and appellate practice. And as the name suggests, we are in search of justice, particularly in the criminal legal system. And our job here is to, specifically at the University of Mississippi, is to look at the Mississippi criminal legal system and to bring impact litigation and to pursue advocacy to improve and reform and transform the criminal legal system in Mississippi, the most punitive state in America, where we battle back and forth with Louisiana to have the highest rate of incarceration per capita. A sad distinction, but a reality that with which we deal on a regular basis. So I think the state's really lucky, frankly, that MacArthur chose University of Mississippi. I certainly feel lucky to be here and to have the support of not just MacArthur, but also the university. And we've been at it. I've been at this job now for 11 years and have a lot of fun. It's frustrating, as you can imagine, but really good work.
Good.
Do you get involved in any individual cases?
We do. So our view, Jim, of impact litigation, or a lot of people see it as just class actions in federal court. We think that individual cases, for example, we've represented nearly 75 people who were sentenced to life without parole as juveniles. We've represented those individual cases as a way of getting at the larger issue of what do we do with juvenile justice. So we do, yeah.
As I noticed that the oldest serving, I hate to say prisoner, but that's what he is. The oldest serving guy was just put to death.
We knew Richard, Jim. Yeah, Jim, we had sued the state of Mississippi over the conditions on death row. And as part of that settlement, we're given access to the row as much as we wanted to be there, which was quite often. We would talk to the guys, cell side, get to know them. We got to know Richard. He was always a gentleman, a good guy, and who had done a bad thing. And we this week, the state of Mississippi, in the name of taxpayers, executed a 79-year-old man, a military veteran, and we continue to impose that most serious of punishments, which I oppose and don't think is good policy. This was particularly painful, and unless we change things, there's more executions to come.
Well, we're trying to help you on this. We've got Representative Curry coming up in a week or so about the healthcare issues at Parchman.
Great. Yeah.
So
Really important. Yeah. Yeah. I think, people need to look at what Vital Core is doing there and across the state. And, privatization of these services in prisons is an issue that we all look at closely.
Sounds like it. You've had such a career. This morning, I noticed that the Supreme Court came down, issued a ruling on a case that essentially gave Trump universal power with his memorandums and limited courts to their own jurisdiction, which I guess means to me that if something comes up that is of nationwide importance, like the citizenship issue, somebody somewhere has got to be ready to file in every district court in the country. If
Or,
it's going to
or,
have,
or Jim, to try to get a national class action certified, and which is no easy lift. But in response to that, what I will say that we all need to be thinking long and hard about is this is an unprecedented shift of power to the executive. And our current situation, that's Donald Trump. Who knows who it'll be after 2028, whether Democrat or Republican. It's part of this extraordinary use of power by the executive, and this case talks about the power of presidentially appointed Article 3 district judges, serious people, to issue universal injunctions, is the legal term of art, nationwide injunctions that go beyond the interests of just the parties before the court, where there's a clear constitutional issue. Part of the reason that was so important that judges be able to do that at the district court level was because some of these violations, whether it's birthright citizenship, where someone could immediately be whisked away, whether it's these mass layoffs that Doge undertook, where people are going to lose their livelihoods, their homes, are going to become, very much economically insecure. We needed to have the capacity to move into courts quickly, maintain the status quo for just long enough for the issue to work its way through the courts. The opinion that was issued this morning, just an hour or so ago, which I've not had a chance to study, dramatically limits the power of district courts to maintain the status quo, to put a hold on things across the board nationally for a larger group of people, while these issues ultimately will be decided by the Supreme Court. What's going to happen to lawyers now, to your point, Jim, is that we're going to have to completely recalibrate how we get these issues up quickly. And everyone who follows the court understands that getting a constitutional case framed up for the United States Supreme Court to ultimately rule can take an extraordinary amount of time. And it will be interesting to see what lawyers do in response. We'll have to think at the MacArthur Justice Center, and others will have to think about how we approach this. But it leaves us in a situation now where Congress, who that hasn't shown a willingness to stand in the way of the executive, is out of the picture by and large. The
yes,
executive was rolling hot and doing everything it can to expand its power, and now that we've hamstrung the judiciary to check the power of this president. So this is a troubling time. I'm deeply concerned about
is I won't ask you your opinion of Beauvais being appointed, but it seems to me like the deck is getting stacked, and more we are losing our rights, and even our rights to have a right, if that makes any sense. And the Supreme Court has become, at least in my opinion, a very political body. Uh, Everything is 6-3. Well, not everything, but the majority of everything is 6-3 along political lines. I'm to the point that whoever is the next president, maybe we need to consider expanding the Supreme Court. There's got to be some more balance. The Supreme Court's like the Mississippi legislature. It's got a supermajority, and the minority just doesn't count anymore.
Yeah, and I've been thinking about that a lot, Jim, in the context of how long that majority will be in place. And the Republicans do quite an effective job at appointments, getting their appointments through. The Democrats, we seem to struggle as a lifelong Mississippi Democrat, which can be a tough life at times. We seem to struggle and not be as um, calculating and effective in getting our appointees through. We've seen that recently, and I think that um, everyone, regardless of what your feelings are about the current administration, needs to be aware that while you might love the executive orders that are being issued by President Trump today, if you have President um, AOC or President Gavin Newsom or President Pete Buttigieg, who has unfettered power and discretion, that perhaps you will not feel so warm and fuzzy about it. And I will tell you that even though I would love to see a Democrat get elected in 2028, I'm not comfortable with those candidates or any other Democratic candidates having that degree of unfettered authority to rule through executive order. And so I think, Jim, you're 100% right. We're dealing with structural challenges, constitutional crises, and so I think everything has to be on the table as we think about solutions, not so much to gain partisan advantage, but to bring back that balance of power and to return power to people, to the citizenry, in a way that feels true to American ideals and values, right? It's supposed to be about we the people, and we're becoming more and more detached from power. And I'm deeply troubled about that.
Yes, we don't seem to be. We got we the people part, but we don't have, in order to form a more perfect union. We've got more silos now than we ever have had, and more people hating each other than we ever have in the past.
Yeah.
And it's all political.
Yeah, I see it, Jim, at the law school. It's interesting. I attract certain students to my class, which focuses on civil rights law and litigation, and people who are passionate about reform, passionate about what they're going to do with their law degrees. And one of the things that I'm concerned about is, and I'm going to talk about young people now, then I'm going to move to people maybe who are older than that, more my age, who maybe have lost the ability to do some of these things. But what I see at the law school is our students aren't doing a great job at being able to sit in a room with someone who disagrees with them, who articulates their position, the reasons for it, who maybe says something provocative. And rather than engaging in a productive way, right, people shut down, get angry, go home, and write a strongly worded social media post. And they talk about how impacted they were about this terrible thing that happened to them. These are future lawyers, right? And so I wonder about our younger folks, who I'm pro. I'm not one of these people who's down on younger folks. I'm inspired by them. I think there's a lot of incredible energy out there that makes me hopeful. But I worry about that aspect of it. Then I think about my own peers, and I see the way that the groups that I'm in often are not very politically, ideologically diverse. And I wonder whether those muscles that we once had in decent shape around being engaged with people with whom we disagree have atrophied some as a result of the current climate, which I think has been exacerbated by President Trump for sure. I will say that I think he's very much an influence on this. But I think even on the left, we have to take some responsibility as well, and we have to keep our own house in order as far as our willingness to stick our nose in there and stay in the room. So I worry about that.
I think that one of the things that I have been encouraged by is the law firms that caved in to Trump and signed on to do all that pro bono work without knowing what pro bono work it was going to be, have had some of their top people resign and leave, and some of their top clients leave as well because they understand that if you don't have a spine and stand up for what's right, you will fall for anything or do anything. And I want
Yeah.
an attorney who represents me to the best of his ability. Whether I'm right or wrong, I want to be represented to the best of his ability.
Yeah, I mean, this is a time where people are having to make very difficult choices to do things that may cause them to pay a price, right? So it's easy to take a position if it costs you nothing. What we're all about to have to address is the prospect that we're going to have to do things that cost us money or status or comfort or security. And I think, Jim, we're at that point. I think we're at a serious enough point in our history. This is an unprecedented and unusual time where we're all going to be asked to to step up. And I'm proud of those people as well. At the same time, we've seen the Civil Rights Division at the Department of Justice empty out. And I don't blame those people who are being asked to do things that are anathema to them and being asked to take on cases that they just can't in good conscience take on. And so this attack on institutions, on systems, on structures that have helped our society operate has has caused a lot of people to step away because of their philosophical convictions. Um, and we have those two things happening. On the one hand, people saying that they're going to um, preserve their careers, their law firm, their law practice, their client base. On the other hand, people who are going to step out into unemployment, step out into uncertainty, so as not to further the administration. And we're all going to ultimately have to decide which side we're on. And
First time I
I think we're
ever,
there. Yeah.
the first time I ever needed an attorney, uh, and we went to court, and I don't even recall how it turned out. It was too many years ago, and it was probably insignificant, but I thought it was important to me. But I was shocked that my attorney was friends with the defense attorney. And only as I got older did I understand that it's not about personalities, it's about what the law says and how you interpret it. And you don't have to be enemies to disagree on what the law actually says. You can still be friends. And when I hear you talk about your students, that really bothers me that we've got young people that cannot talk to each other respectfully and disagree because 10 or 20 years from now, they're not going to be polite people to talk to when they disagree with you.
Yeah, and I tell you one thing, Jim, to put the onus on us a little bit, I think we as older folks have to model that behavior. And so I think we also need to think about the way we move in this world and ask whether we're showing them how to do that well. I hope that we are. I like to think that we are, but I think it's a time when it's difficult. Families are divided. Thanksgiving's tough in a lot of families right now. I mean,
It's tough on turkeys.
I have it's tough on turkeys and it's tough on parents and children, right? I mean, I have
Yeah.
students who for whom the thought of going back home to rural Mississippi or Texas or Georgia or Missouri and sitting at that dinner table with mom and daddy and their aunts and uncles and maybe their brothers and sisters and somebody's going to say a thing and it's just going to be painful to have to listen to it. I think we see it in our universities, we see it in our workplace, we see it in our friend groups, right? We see it in our churches, and we see it at our universities where people feel so passionately about this, with that in and of itself is not such a bad thing, but they feel so passionately. And in many instances, they are so quick to vilify the people who disagree with them that it becomes hard to engage in meaningful conversation. One of the things I told my two children, who are now 31 and 27, their entire childhood, is please, please don't vilify every person who disagrees with you. You're going to miss out on some friendships and you're going to miss out on some opportunities for growth if you turn everyone who thinks differently than you do into an enemy. I think we have to be strong and committed and resolved to stand up for what we believe in. At the same time, we 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 can do that without doing violence, emotional or Lord forbid physical, to people who disagree with us.
Well, it's not just you. If you take, at least in my opinion, if you take the under 25 age group, uh, maybe not so much in the major cities, major
Mhm.
in Mississippi, uh, disagreements are settled with gunfights. That's the way people choose to have disagreements, and
Well, yeah, and I
that's
mean
not a solution.
that's a big conversation. We represent some of those people, right, in the work that we do, and I think that reality of the the hopelessness, the desperation, the structure of our communities and the way that it doesn't respond to the needs of children and families and young people. I don't believe that people are born to be gunfighters and to be violent. I just don't. That's not the way I believe the world works. So something happens in those situations, and I think that in this world, in this country, where we have this very individualistic view of your fortunes, your success, your failures, I think we have to have some conversations about communal responsibility for those situations where cities and communities are ravaged by violence, right? Like how do we get there? What's the impact of failing to support working parents and schools and mental health centers and access to health care and you name it, right? And when I lived in Sweden for a year, Jim, and it was interesting when I would walk around some of the cities there. I was teaching the law and history of the American Civil Rights Movement. I was doing lectures at different places on the immigration and integration in Sweden, where they're struggling with that. And if I saw a homeless person, which was very rare, it was a source of great embarrassment to my Swedish hosts, and they saw that not as a failure of that person. They wouldn't say that dude's a bum, he's a loser, he could be better if he wants, but he just sorry, as we say in Mississippi. Um, they would try to explain and address why Sweden as a country or that local community had failed. And I think what happens to us, right, if we're driving through Jackson or Memphis or Meridian or Tupelo or any town and there's somebody on the side of the road, we look at them and we talk about all the reasons they are where they are and how they could just pull themselves up by their bootstrap. And we don't have that same sense of corporate responsibility. So I think about the truth of what you said. People are solving problems with gunfights and violence, and things are happening that are not what we want and things we can't accept. Um, and I think what the conversation I want to be a part of is a conversation that says, what can we do to change that? And what did we do to contribute to that? And I'm not sure everybody wants to have that conversation.
I don't think many people want to have that conversation, but I never forget. My father was an obstetrician gynecologist in Kansas City, and I don't know what the conversation, how it came up at the dinner table one night, but I remember my dad saying, "No mother ever had a baby that she wanted to raise to be somebody who was worthless to society."
Sure.
That dream of America that anybody could become president, man, that's such a wide span of uh, middle income to a lot of power. Uh, that dream's not out there for 95% of us or more. I'm not sure, but
Yeah, man.
anyway,
You talk about painful things to see around a law school is young people who don't believe, and these are law students um, who have bright futures ahead of them and will likely earn more than minimum wage and maybe be above middle class, who don't believe they can buy a house, they can afford to have children, they can afford to have any of the things or many of the things that their parents and grandparents had. That'll break your heart listening to these people say, well, my wife and I, my fiance and I have run the numbers. It's $2,000 a month per child for childcare in the city we live in or where we plan to go. We don't think we can have those things. And, that's the conversation that so many people are having about, the whether the American dream is dead and whether and what we can do to give people the hope that you described, where we used to be told you can be anything you want to be. It's all out there in front of you if you just work hard and do the right things. And I'm afraid that there's a lot of people who don't believe that at all, and with good reason.
Let's talk a little bit about what's going on in Mississippi and get your thoughts on this. The first thing would be what's your thoughts about the elimination of the state income tax?
There's been this conversation, David, about this silver bullet of eliminating the state income tax, and all of a sudden Mississippi's going to have the same economy as Texas or Florida. They get held out as kind of examples of where these things happen. And I think that just ignores the reality of the differences in the economies and in the job opportunities and the industrial realities of those states. And here we are in the poorest state of Mississippi. It's the poorest state in the country. 30% of our revenue comes from the state income tax. You're talking about billions of dollars haircut to what we receive over the course of time, where we have failing schools and struggling communities, and this kind of hearkening to trickle down views of the economy, where if we make put more money in people's pockets, rich people's pockets, that everybody benefits. Um, I've just never seen that to be true, and so we're dealing with, I think, a move to a regressive system that is going to have a much more significant impact on people who don't earn as much money, particularly on people of color, because disproportionately they live in poverty in the state of Mississippi. So, I'm like everybody else. If there's a way to pay less in taxes and not suffer one whit of consequences, right? Who doesn't think that sounds great? But I think that um, we all should be concerned about the notion of losing that kind of revenue in a state that historically has struggled to provide basic services to its citizens.
David and I were
What do you
just talking about.
what do you think?
Oh, we don't we don't
We don't
want to
have
go
that
there
much
right
time.
now. Uh, Jim,
Well,
I think you had
David and
something
I
to
were
say.
talking about that very issue last night, and I told him TVA has announced, I think, a 6% increase in electric bills that we're going to have. The gasoline tax goes into effect July 1st, which is going to raise taxes on gasoline. Uh, the legislature passed a law that allows at least Lee County to add $25 to any court case or $50 if it's a DUI. Uh, and I don't mean to imply that these are the people that are least able to pay. Some of them are most able to pay. Uh, my house taxes went up last year. I think the people of Mississippi don't know what's coming down the railroad track.
Yeah, Jim, and
Kansas, Kansas saw it and turned it around real darn quick because they went bankrupt.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, all of us, want to see Mississippi thrive and do well, and are hoping that this all works out. But I think you're exactly right. I mean, we have to learn from the experiences of other states, and we can't assume that we're going to have the same outcome as much larger states with much more robust economies. The other thing, when you were talking about that 25 to $50 increase in court filings, one of the things I found, and it was true for me, frankly, until I really got involved in economic justice and poverty issues as a lawyer. I was, raised in a middle class, suburban, upper middle class, perhaps suburban family. Was the reality of what, particularly in the state of Mississippi, 25 or 50 or 100 or $200 means to a family living week to week, month to month. So many of my law students, when we're dealing with debtors' prisons issues, for example, where people are being put in jail because they can't pay misdemeanor fines and fees, and we talk about the amount of payment plans that people can handle. If somebody owes $1,000 to Tupelo, right? And you say, well, your payment plan is going to be, well, I won't make you pay it all at once, but you have to pay it $250 at a time. For a lot of people, that 250 is devastating, out of reach, and means you're going to have to not pay the light bill or the water bill or some other, obligation. And a lot of people who are fortunate not to know this don't realize how much 250 or 100 or $50 is to a lot of people and a lot of families in Mississippi. And so I think what I think is going to happen is the people who are going to get hit by that train coming down the tracks are the people who are most vulnerable, most on the edge, who can't afford that increase in gas tax. They're going to feel it. The lack of city and municipal resources, they're going to feel it. Rate hikes, they're going to feel it in ways that many other folks won't. And um, it's just I don't want to get too far down this theological road, but I often think when we're talking about matters of poverty and economic justice, I'm just reminded that we are the most religious state in America, right? We are people who profess to believe deeply in particularly Christian values. And so when we adopt these policies and I think don't pay enough attention to the impacts on poor folks, working folks, folks on the margins. I find that intersection really interesting and troubling. I worry about folks, and I think this isn't good news.
Yeah,
We
because
have had
it just, it,
Kyra Roby, who's a
Yeah.
political analyst, had a great conversation with her, and she broke it down for us. The very wealthy, yes, they're going to save about $45,000 a year. Okay, Tate Reeves is going to save $45,000 a year. Good for him. The average Mississippian will save about $40 a year. The poorest of the poor, they're going to save four. That's one, two, three, $4. And and then you talk about the gasoline tax going up. That's going to hit them the hardest. And it's just so I don't see the numbers adding up with the elimination of the state income tax. We've got so many other issues in the state with our public health system, with not accepting the uh, Medicaid expansion and the federal funds for that. So I think that's horrendous. Some of the things that we're doing to the underserved in Mississippi.
in your coursework at Ole Miss, do you spend more time on the First and Second Amendment or on the 14th?
A lot of time on the 14th Amendment, Jim, a lot of equal protection talk for sure. And, because we're criminal legal system focused, We're dealing on Eighth Amendment cruel and unusual punishment. We're dealing on Sixth Amendment right to counsel, meaningful counsel for indigent defendants. We're dealing with equal protection violations, people who get treated differently for reasons that don't pass constitutional muster. So, it leads us to conversations that are not unlike the conversation we've had about the state income tax, and that is, does our system stand up for, protect, recognize the value of everyone, the dignity of everyone, or are we selective? And do we believe that some people's rights or integrity counts less? And that's a big conversation. And the thing I worry about, Jim, with this new DEI law that's been passed by the state of Mississippi is how much I can talk about the 14th Amendment anymore if we don't have a court intervene.
You mentioned the Eighth Amendment and indigence. Not to put you on the spot or anything, but it seems to me that if you were to ask society, I think the overwhelming majority would say indigents have rights, but don't bother me with them.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's this thing that's happening that we ought to pay attention to, and I think you heard it from the right in this last campaign, which is right, which is like, leave me alone, let me live my life, don't force all this stuff down my throat. Your issues aren't my issues, and stay out of it. And you're and then you can't classify me as an evil person if I don't care about these things. So that's this kind of run toward this individualism. Um, while at the same time, right, inviting government into some very delicate aspects of our lives and very personal aspects of our lives and saying we're okay with that. So um, I think that getting back to my notion of, communal responsibility and what's our role in creating violent or unstable neighborhoods is I think we are um, seeing in the legislative action here in Mississippi uh, this notion that we don't want people talking to us about these things, about the poor, about race. We don't want them talking to us about gender identity. I don't want to talk about national origin, and I don't want you talking to my kids about it. And I just want to live a life that allows me, if I don't want to deal with any of that, to avoid it. And that I think that sentiment's out there, and I think it's troubling, and I don't think it's going to move us to becoming the kind of state or the kind of country we want to be, because we have to deal honestly with the challenges and needs and barriers that other people are dealing with.
You mentioned the churches and Mississippi being part of the Bible Belt. It's interesting. It seems that, and I don't want to get off into Christian nationalists. That's something for a different day.
I can
But
talk a
it's
long time on that one, David, but go ahead.
uh,
Yeah.
good. You and I need to get together on this
Yeah,
one.
yeah.
I I
As a
love it.
longtime Baptist Sunday school teacher and deacon, I got thoughts. So anyway, go ahead.
Got it. And I'm a United Methodist, not
Yeah.
a global Methodist, but a United Methodist.
Yes.
And everything's about the Ten Commandments, but we forget about, or we don't want to look at, or nobody wants to talk about the Beatitudes. You know, and that's we talk about the country getting back to Christ. Well, Christ is about the Beatitudes, and so
Yeah, and
that's
and look, the one thing we know, the one thing I know from having been raised Southern Baptist, and I'm no longer Southern Baptist and had to leave that behind. But we know that there are people who are in much more conservative denominations and who are more conservative politically than I am, who are who are fine people, who are good people, who are serious about their faith,
I
and
agree.
and they are um, devoted people who loved me and helped raise me. Having said that, having said that, I think that you're right. I mean, this notion of a Christian ethic that people want to talk about very publicly and they want to talk about it in the context of government, um, then you get all of it. You don't just get to take um, the Old Testament eye for an eye. You get the Sermon on the Mount, and you get the when were you naked and I clothed you, right? And you get what you did unto the least of these, you did unto me. And so I think if we're gonna talk about that, then we got to talk about all of it. And it doesn't mean that we have to agree on everything, right? We can disagree, and I'm fine with that. I
Uh-huh.
think we but we have to deal with all of it, red letters and all. So that's a conversation people I believe people of goodwill and serious faith can have. And I can be in the room with those folks who are willing to have that conversation. Happy to do that.
Well,
Got it.
what do we do with those who uh, are not of the Christian faith?
Look, I mean, I think there's a lot of people who have checked out long ago or never were part of that who are
Yes.
very interested in that conversation, right, about the ethics. So whether for some of us that comes from a Christian faith or doctrine, and for others it comes from their moral compass that's developed through other means. I think that's a conversation that I don't want to push religion down anybody's throat for sure. But I think it's a conversation that captures these larger issues of, are we committed to protecting the interests of our neighbors and friends who struggle, our neighbors and friends who have had bad luck or made bad decisions and who are in bad place? And whether that comes from a Christian perspective or that comes from a wholly secular perspective, in my mind, that's the conversation. That's the Medicaid expansion conversation. That's the cost of housing conversation. That's the criminal legal system. That's the public safety conversation. And
That's
we're either
absolutely.
committed to the entire community or we're not. And we need to be honest about it. And if we are committed to the entire community, then we're going to have to invest money and time and energy in things and structures and programs that don't exist right now. And it's going to be a paradigm shift. And I'm up for it. I'm up for the conversation, and I'm up for the effort.
I'm
Yeah,
with you.
we
I'm
keep
with you there.
talking about it.
Cliff, as we close it down, uh, Cliff, any final words uh, for us? Anything that we can help you with, or anything that you want our viewers and our listeners to hear?
Well, I like the fact that this show focuses on Mississippi and Mississippi happenings. And I think
Thank you.
that as folks who live here and are from here, so many times we get into this mindset that we can't have nice things in Mississippi, and we settle for things that are less than. And I, I guess what I would say to you guys, knowing that you care about this place and you're doing this podcast because you care about this place,
We do.
is that we can have nice things. We can do right. We
Yes.
can do better, and we just have to expect that of ourselves and one another. We have to demand that, and we have to work on that with other people. Right there isn't for those of us who are on the left of these issues. There aren't enough of us to do this alone. We're going to have to there are a lot of us, and there are more of us than people think. And let me be clear about that. We are a significant percentage of this population, but we have to have the capacity to be strong and clear in our beliefs and in our commitments and our convictions, while at the same time being able to engage with people who disagree with us on some things. And I want to reiterate one thing I said, and that and in my view of how we get there in Mississippi is, I think we have to embrace the reality that we don't have to agree on everything with somebody to be able to work with them or alongside them. are to invite them into our tent, our community, right? I have friends with whom I have enjoyed great, you know, um, trips, vacations, parties, canoe trips, and I don't agree with them on a lot of things, and I get frustrated with them, and I argue with them, and I like them, and I like them. I do like them, and I think we have to hold on to our capacity, not to give in. It's not about meeting in some mushy middle. It's
Yeah.
about holding strong to our convictions and fighting for them and being willing to do that with people and being open to the work of changing people's minds and having our own minds changed, right? And I think that in Mississippi, um, there are a lot of good people here, and we just can't settle, y'all. We can't settle. We can have nice things in Mississippi. I'm convinced of it. I see it. I see it happening. So anyway, I want to be hopeful and I want to be optimistic. I am hopeful and optimistic. And I think that these conversations that we're having, although they address really serious, dire issues, doesn't mean that we can't do it with optimism and hope. I think that fuels us in a way that doing it out of fear and hate will eat us up and we'll run out of gas.
Well,
Understood.
we're
Thank
not
you.
going to run out of
Thank you so
gas.
much.
The writer of Mark Twain, I've forgotten his name, but he said, it's never wrong to do the right thing.
Right. Yep. I agree.
Loved
This has
having
been
you on.
fun.
Yes,
What's that, Jim?
some serious issues we've talked about, but they need talking about openly.
Absolutely. Cliff, once again, thank you so much, and we'd love to have you back and to share your thoughts. We do want to thank our sponsors, our subscribers. We do appreciate your continued support. If you have any questions, comments, suggestions, you can reach us at mshappenings1@gmail.com. That's mshappenings and the number 1@gmail.com. And as always, may we never be indifferent to the suffering of others. Thanks.
Amen.
Amen.